And then those Scots had to take me out of my... they had to take me out of there.
The internet is on fire again, and this time, the heat is coming straight for Martell Holt. People aren't just talking, they're furious, because what started as whispers has now turned into loud accusations that are impossible to ignore. Fans are saying Martell isn't just falling short, he's disappearing when it matters most. And the part that's hitting everyone hard, these claims involve his own kids. Yeah, let that sink in. The same man who once proudly wore the title of family man, the same one who flooded social media with smiling photos and fatherhood quotes, is now being called out for allegedly doing the exact opposite behind the scenes. And the internet, it's not buying the polished image anymore. But here's the twist. This isn't just about one moment or one mistake. People are starting to see a pattern, a cycle of promises, excuses, and silence. And now the question isn't just what happened, it's why it keeps happening.
I just hate that this narrative is going around and, bloggers picking things up and, certain people trying to destroy me. But it's not going to happen, though. I'm not going to allow it to happen.
To really understand why emotions are running so high, you have to go back to the beginning. Because this story didn't start with outrage, it started with hope. There was a time when Martell Holt looked like he had it all figured out. On the outside, his life seemed like something people admired. A beautiful wife, successful businesses, and a growing family that looked picture perfect. When he first stepped into the spotlight, people were drawn to him. He had charm, confidence, and a presence that made it seem like he was built for success. And alongside him was Melody, strong, driven, and fully invested in building a life not just for herself, but for their children.
People who are on a path of self-destruction, and that's all they know is self-destruction. It ain't nobody doing it to you. It ain't nobody forcing you nothing. You are self-destructing yourself. Okay.
Together, they created an image that felt almost untouchable. They weren't just a couple, they were a brand, a representation of success, love, and partnership. But behind that polished image, cracks were already forming. At first, those cracks were easy to ignore. Small things, subtle changes, moments where something felt off but not enough to raise alarms. But over time, those small issues started stacking up. Late nights, distance, silence where there used to be communication. And then came the betrayal.
Victim all the time.
Ooh,
it gets on my nerves.
So everybody just heard everything Martell said.
No, because
that I'm playing the victim.
I wish one day people will see the person that you really...
When the truth about Martell's infidelity surfaced, it didn't just shock fans, it shattered everything. Because this wasn't just a rumor, it was real, messy, and impossible to hide. The man who once stood as a symbol of loyalty had been living a completely different reality behind closed doors. Melody tried to hold things together, for her kids, for the life they built. But there's only so much a person can carry before it breaks them. And when she finally walked away, it wasn't out of weakness, it was survival. That moment changed everything. From that point on, Martell's image began to shift, slowly at first, but then all at once. The admiration started turning into criticism, the support turned into questions, and people began watching him differently.
There were multiple people in this marriage, let's be clear.
Stop lying!
It's not a lie!
Damn! Get tired of you lying so much!
Because now it wasn't just about what he said, it was about what he did. And that brings us to where things stand today, because the story didn't end with the divorce. In fact, that's where things got even more complicated. After the separation, many people expected Martell to step up, especially as a father, because no matter what happens between adults, the children should never have to suffer. That's the one thing everyone agrees on. At first, it seemed like he understood that. He talked about co-parenting. He posted about his kids. He made it look like he was still deeply involved in their lives. But here's where things start to unravel. Behind those posts, a different story was quietly unfolding. fans started noticing inconsistencies, moments where things didn't quite add up. He would share pictures of happy family time, but then disappear for long stretches. He would speak about being present, but people close to the situation hinted otherwise. And then the conversations got louder.
Playing mind games, that's just what he does. Like him showing up here today with these flowers, this smile on his face like Prince Charming, when we all know that he's responsible for all of the stuff happening on social media pertaining to me. That could change people's opinions about me by him giving these false narratives. He's responsible for it.
Melody, without directly calling him out, began dropping subtle truths. Not in a messy way, not for attention, but in a way that felt real, honest, tired. She spoke about handling everything on her own, about the pressure of raising kids while juggling work, responsibilities, and emotional weight. And while she never turned it into a public attack, her words painted a picture that people couldn't ignore. It wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. There was a quiet strength in her voice, but also exhaustion, the kind that comes from carrying more than your share for too long. And that's when fans started connecting the dots. Because if Martell was truly showing up the way he claimed, why did everything seem so one-sided? But wait, it doesn't stop there. What nobody expected was for voices from outside that immediate circle to start echoing the same concerns. People began pointing out that this wasn't an isolated issue, that the inconsistency wasn't just occasional, it was becoming a pattern. And once that narrative took hold, it spread fast. Social media turned into a battlefield. Comments flooded in, some defending him, others calling him out. But the majority, they were asking hard questions. Where is he when it matters? Why does it feel like he's more present online than in real life? And perhaps the most painful question of all, are the kids being left behind in all of this? Now, let's be real for a second. Parenting isn't easy, especially after a breakup. It takes effort, patience, and consistency. It requires showing up, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's uncomfortable. And that's exactly what people feel is missing, because what fans are seeing doesn't match what they're hearing. Martell continues to present himself as a dedicated father. He speaks about love, about connection, about doing his best. But actions tell a different story. There have been reports, unconfirmed but persistent, that he's not as involved as he claims, that visits are inconsistent, that communication isn't always there, that responsibilities are falling unevenly on one side. And every time those claims surface, the backlash grows stronger. But instead of addressing the concerns directly, Martell often responds defensively. He pushes back. He blames misunderstandings. He suggests that people don't know the full story. And maybe that's true. But here's the thing. Perception matters. And right now, the perception isn't in his favor. Because people aren't just judging his words, they're watching his behavior. And from what they can see, something isn't adding up. Meanwhile, Melody continues to move forward. She's working, building, providing, showing up every single day for her kids. And while she doesn't make a spectacle out of it, her consistency speaks louder than anything else. That contrast, it's impossible to ignore. And that's where the emotional weight of this situation really hits. Because at the center of all this noise, all this drama, all this public debate, are children. Children who didn't ask for any of this. Children who are growing up in the middle of a story that's being watched by thousands of people. A story filled with tension, absence, and unanswered questions. And no matter how you spin it, that leaves a mark. Because kids notice everything. They notice who shows up. They notice who doesn't. They remember the effort, the presence, the consistency. And they also remember the silence. That's the part that makes this situation so heavy. Because while adults can argue, defend, and explain, children simply feel. They feel the absence. They feel the inconsistency. They feel the difference between words and actions. And over time, those feelings turn into memories. Memories that don't fade easily. For Martell, this isn't just about public opinion anymore. It's about legacy. Because the way this story unfolds, the choices he makes, the effort he puts in, that's what will define how his children see him in the future. Not the social media posts, not the interviews, not the explanations, just the reality of what he did and didn't do. And that's a heavy truth to face. Because while the internet may move on to the next story, real life doesn't reset that easily. The impact stays. The emotions stay. The consequences stay. And here's where things get even more complicated. Despite all the backlash, Martell still has a chance to change the narrative. He's not out of time. He's not beyond redemption. But change doesn't happen through words. It happens through action. Consistent action. Real effort, showing up not just when it's convenient, but when it's necessary, owning mistakes instead of deflecting them, choosing responsibility over pride. Because right now, people aren't just looking for statements, they're looking for proof. Proof that he understands the weight of the situation, proof that he's willing to do better, proof that the love he talks about is backed by real commitment. And until that happens, the criticism isn't going anywhere, because people can be forgiving, but they're not blind. They see patterns, they notice behavior, and once trust is broken, it takes more than words to rebuild it. So now, everything comes down to one question. What happens next? Does Martell take a step back, reflect, and truly make a change? Or does he continue down the same path, hoping the noise eventually fades? Because here's the truth. This isn't just about public image anymore. It's about relationships. It's about responsibility. It's about being the person his children need him to be, not just the person he wants the world to see. And time? Time is the one thing he doesn't have unlimited access to. Because kids grow up, moments pass, opportunities to be present don't wait forever, and once they're gone, they're gone. So while the internet debates, argues, and reacts, the real story is unfolding quietly, day by day, in the lives of the people directly affected. And in the end, that's what matters most. Not the headlines, not the opinions, just the truth of what was done and what was left undone. Because one day, when all the noise fades, when the cameras stop rolling, and when the spotlight shifts elsewhere, the only thing that will remain is the reality he created. And the question is, will that reality be something he's proud of, or something he wishes he could rewrite?